It is 8:13 and time now for our latest segment of First and Finest. And this morning we are joined by Brian Foley with the Connecticut Department of Emergency Services and Public Protection. Brian, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
No, thanks for having me, Angelo. Thank you.
Of course. So a lot of news coming out of Bridgeport this past week. So just to recap for people watching at home, we have the city's now former police chief, A.J. Perez, and personnel director both hit with federal charges for rigging the police chief exam. Perez has since resigned, and the mayor named acting police chief Rebecca Garcia to run the department. A lot happening here. So can you just give us some insight into how all of this really affects the police department, the city's operations there?
Yeah, that's a good question. Obviously, when something like that happens, it shakes the police department, and in fact, it shakes the entire city, and you have some concerns. And Bridgeport has, to say the least, had somewhat of a history, unfortunately, with this sort of thing. So it's unfortunate for the entire community down there. I did speak to the police chief this week down there and many members of the community. The police chief understands that there's a process that's going to have to be worked through. She expressed her main concerns were the well-being and the safety of the city, and then continuing the transparency and accountability and trying to build trust in the community. In speaking with some of the community members down there, their concern, to include Senator Moore, their main concerns were that they were going to try to turn this into a positive. Obviously, they were sad to see that Bridgeport had this happen in their city, but they wanted to turn to a positive and had a positive outlook for things moving forward, moving from there. But what's most important is at the rank and file level, is the continuation of services in the police department. Look, in any city, there's a lot of turnover at the police chief position, and that's just the fact of life. And when it happens, and unfortunately in this manner, or in any manner, the continuation of services is what's important, and I think that's what you're seeing down in the city of Bridgeport. The women and men are still behaving very bravely, as we'll get into, in doing their job.
And you just mentioned this, but the city's history, the past history there, wanting to rebuild this trust. How do you effectively do that, given the city's history, given what's going on right now?
You know, hard work. Putting the work in and putting the effort in and building those relationships. You know, we went through some tough times over the decades here in the city of Hartford, and the police department's done some amazing things, and the Connecticut State Police as well has certainly made some incredible improvements all across the state. It just takes time. It takes a philosophy and understanding from the top all the way down to the rank and file that your main goal here is the safety of everybody involved, but also building trust in relationships.
And what does that process look forward to now? You know, when can we expect a new police chief to be named permanently?
Look, there's a process that's going to play out down there, and I had this discussion with the Chief Garcia, and she understands that process is going to play out, and there's not a lot that anyone's that's could potentially be chief that wants to be involved in that process. There's not a lot they can control. What she said that she can control, again, is the safety of the city and the community. There's going to be a legal process, I'm sure, involved in it. But look, right now that department's got a lot of leaders, and the city as well, to effectively keep it running very smoothly. And that's what you're seeing, the continuation of safe police services for the entire city.
Gotcha. And staying in Bridgeport, another big story this past week, there was a police-involved shooting. There was some body camera video that was released. We can probably show that. But can you just walk us through that video? What happened there?
Okay, so I can't see what you're showing there, but I did watch that video, and one of the first things you notice when that cop comes in is if you look on the left side of the wall going up the stairs, you see blood, bloody handprints. So there's enough blood to be on somebody's hand and to be on the wall. I got to tell you, as a cop and walking into an apartment and seeing that sort of blood on the wall, you can bet that you have a heightened sense of awareness and safety going in there. And this entire incident basically takes about 8 seconds to unfold. 8 seconds for this officer to see one person stabbing another person with a knife. And oh, by the way, that's not exactly a Swiss Army knife. That's a large knife, and you can see him attacking somebody else with it. That officer deploys his taser while trying to run up the stairs. Very difficult to do. Obviously, it didn't set. And as he's watching one person with a large knife attacking another person, he made the split-second decision and shot the suspect one time. Thankfully, no one died. That's to include the person being stabbed. That's including the suspect who was shot, and the officer was not injured as well. But what's so important here is just 2 or 3 years ago, we would have been fighting to see the body camera, if there even were body cameras. So now you have this incident happen. Tuesday night. And now we have the full video out there. You can see here what the job that the officer did. And you know, there's a lot of talk about who do you send to emotionally despondent person calls. You walk in, someone's stabbing and attacking another person with a large knife. There ain't no one that can solve that problem but a cop at that point. And that officer, we have video of what happened. Draw your own conclusions as to what happened in that video. It's fairly clear. Thankfully, the Bridgeport Police Department had several body cameras. Thankfully, the Connecticut State's Attorney's Office has already released that, and there's no questions, there's no suspicion of the police. And I want to say that Chief Garcia was out there the next day doing a press conference, releasing the officers' names, talking about the incident with her committee right out in front of out in the city, talking about it. So she's building towards that transparency. You asked, like, what can you do? Well, step one, right, first or second day out of the gate, she's out in the community talking about that shooting. But that video says it all. And again, 3 years ago, Angelo, there would have been protests to see the video. There have been fights to see it, and they have it. They released it. The Connecticut State's Attorney did a good job. The Connecticut State Police Eastern District Major Crimes is assisting with that investigation. But the transparency here is, I think, the big story here, and the fact that no one was killed, that everyone's going to survive, and pretty much got a pretty good look at what a police officer has to go through.
Yeah, and talking about that transparency, what do you think that means in the middle of this debate surrounding police accountability for everybody out there, you know, who wants more police accountability? What does that mean, especially right now with everything that's going on?
That particular case, without getting into the incidents, Angelo, is, again, it was an emotionally despondent person that police were responding to. And there's a lot of talk of who should respond. And to somewhat, I agree with some of those in certain scenarios. But in that scenario there, you watch as the cop goes up the stairs. In a split second, someone pounds through a door and starts attacking somebody else with a large knife. I don't know who else you can call in to handle that sort of thing. Look, we can discuss better ways to equip police, I guess, at best. Either way, only a cop can do that. And it's great that the transparency's out there. You know, great job for the state of Connecticut to get that out. I think this is it's just a great example during these times of proper functioning of police work, proper functioning of transparency, and proper functioning of an open investigation by the state's attorney's office.
We'll be staying on top of that story, Brian. And another story here, switching gears, the CT State Police opening their museum garage this week. So can you tell us what that project is all about?
Look, the Connecticut State Police is a 117-year-old organization, and there's so much history, so much tradition, and such a proud organization. And there's a lot of retirees that are helping, and the organization that runs it is entirely volunteer. And if you go to CSPMuseum.org, you have a lot of information on the museum. But what they opened this week is a garage that has a lot of vehicles in it, old-time vehicles, and it's important for everyone involved to see the history of the police department. From the retirees, it's good for them to be able to share their experiences and pass it on. It's good for our citizens to go in there and see. There's a lot in this museum for citizens to see. But the old police cars are there. I got to tell you, as a my sister was a state trooper, my father was a state trooper, my grandfather was a state trooper, my great uncle, all Connecticut State Troopers. And I am so proud of this organization, the Connecticut State Police. The museum is a walk down memory lane, and to see those cars, I grew up in the back seat of those cruisers. It's just it's great for officer wellness, the troopers to know that when they retire down the road, that they're not just going to be forgotten about, that there's events and organizations like the Alumni Association. They exist entirely, again, on donations. They're a nonprofit. They're generally open on Friday and Saturday afternoons. And again, if you go to CSPMuseum.org, you have all the information there, but some really cool old antique cruisers there.
Yeah, we're just looking at photos. Looks awesome. And one last story here. We're running low on time, but State Police posting some awesome pictures on Facebook after troopers saved a rare hawk this past week. Can you tell us about that rescue?
Yeah, what a great job Trooper Lipwinzik did out there. She saw an injured hawk on the side of the road. It was a very young, broad-winged hawk, which is rare. She did her best to take care of it. DEEP responded. They got it to Sharon Audubon Society. I talked to them this morning, or I talked to DEEP this morning. They said the hawk is going to survive. The prognosis is good. It's only soft tissue damage, but they want everyone to be aware that it's migration season and that there are going to be a lot more of these birds around, and please be careful while you're out there driving.
And that thing looks happy to be rescued. And one last thing, right before this interview, you texted me and said, ask about my experience with the wild animals. So I got to ask about that. Tell us about that.
Well, that was sarcastic, Angelo. I didn't want you to ask me about it. I did have a run in this city right behind me here, a couple blocks away, with a possum once, much to the delight of my friends. Possum 1, Foley 0, that's for sure. It wasn't my bravest moment. Those possums are scary, Angelo.
You'll get them next time, Brian. Thank you so much for joining us.
All right.
Have an awesome day. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
All right, coming up here, the app used by more than 100 million people in the U.S. will soon no longer be available to download. The latest in the saga surrounding TikTok. Plus, another UConn dorm under quarantine after students there tested positive for COVID-19. How colleges across the state are working to stop the spread. Sam?
And Angelo, we didn't break any records this morning, but certainly it was another chilly morning. Coming up, I'll let you know how long this cool snap will last, when a warming trend will commence, and we'll talk about the busy tropics. All the details coming up in the next half hour. Stay with us.